Or I did not realize I was invisible in my own family until I was 13. That was the year my parents drained my college savings, what little had been scraped together to fund my sister Lyra's early admission to an elite conservatory. They called it an investment, as if my future was an afterthought. I remember standing in the hallway clutching a straight A report card while my mom cooed over Lyra's audition tapes, and my dad boomed, "That's my star." I was not even a flicker. They did not mean to forget me. That would have required acknowledging me in the first place. My name is Sky. I was the backup child, the support act, the girl who made dinner while Lyra rehearsed, who ironed her blouses while she prepped for debate finals. I knew the names of her favorite professors, her campus friends, her scholarship contacts. I bet neither of my parents could name one of my teachers. On my 14th birthday, they skipped dinner to drive Lyra to a recital without telling me. I sat at home alone, blowing out candles on a cupcake I bought myself. That night, I opened a journal and wrote, "Someday they'll see me." Not out of vengeance, but because I wanted to believe I mattered. I wanted proof that I existed outside of Lyra's shadow. Over the years, I stopped announcing my grades. I stopped waiting for praise. I learned to do things quietly, apply for scholarships, take on 2 part-time jobs, get accepted into Northgate University's history department without telling a soul. They barely noticed when I packed for college. Maybe they assumed I would just stay behind orbiting Lyra like always. But I was done being the ghost in my own home. That year, something shifted. Not in them, but in me. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would build something they could never take credit for. At 17, I left without a scene. No dramatic suitcase slam, no tearful goodbye. Just a single duffel bag, a stack of textbooks, and a scholarship letter folded into my coat pocket. They barely looked up from Lyra's solo recital itinerary when I said, "I think I'll head to campus a week early." My mother nodded absently. "Be sure to text your sister good luck, not good luck Sky." Just another assignment in the Sky Supports Lyra handbook. So I walked out unnoticed, like a shadow slipping through cracks no one cared to seal. At Northgate, something clicked. I went from invisible to undeniable. My professors saw me, not as a footnote, but as a mind. I was the first freshman in a decade to publish in the Campus Historical Review. I worked 2 jobs and still graduated early magna cum laude, but I did not go back home, not even for holidays, not even when my parents sent guilt-laced messages about missing their sweet helper girl. I stayed silent, still not spiteful, just done. They assumed I was bitter, but in truth, I was building. While Lyra bounced between fellowships and flings, I was quietly securing a graduate placement at the National Archives. By 23, I had my PhD. By 25, I was lecturing at international conferences under the banner Dr. Schuyler Rowe. The girl with no birthday dinner was now fielding TED Talk invitations. Still, I never corrected the family's story. Let them believe I was the quiet one still finding herself. Let them guess where I disappeared to when I stopped answering group texts. If you have ever been the forgotten one, the overlooked one, the one people only remember when they need something, comment yes below so we know we are not alone. And make sure you subscribe to the channel for what comes next, because this story is just heating up. It was not until Lyra's engagement went viral online that I received the first real outreach. A gold-trimmed invitation. Dr. Schuyler Rowe, and guessed it read, "As if we were friends." As if I had not been erased from every family gathering for 5 years. They wanted me there. Maybe out of pity. Maybe for appearances. But they had no idea who was coming. The invitation sat on my marble desk untouched for weeks. A relic of a world I had long stopped orbiting. Lyra and Nathaniel Corday request the honor of your presence. The names shimmered in embossed gold, but the bile in my throat dulled the elegance. Nathaniel, the same man who once offered to walk me to my dorm during a Thanksgiving visit. Who praised my ideas with eyes that lingered too long for a future brother-in-law. Who then vanished from my periphery only to reappear on Lyra's arm a year later. I had not forgotten. I had simply filed the memory away alongside every other wound my family packaged in politeness and wrapped with denial. But now they wanted a photo, a moment, a manufactured reunion to complete their perfect wedding album. I would not give them the satisfaction. I would give them something better, the truth, not the girl they remember, the woman they chose to forget. So I RSVP'd. One line, one name, Dr. Schuyler Rowe plus guest. They would not know who I was bringing, but they would feel it. I opened the armoire in my Paris flat, the one they never knew existed, and pulled out a midnight blue gown, custom-stitched in Florence. Clean lines commanding silhouette. A dress that whispered legacy without saying a word. Then I texted Alex. You said you owed me one. Still true, his reply was instant. Name the day. Former intelligence officer, now private security for high-profile dignitaries. Discreet, powerful, the kind of man who enters a room and quiets it. We had met during a cybersecurity panel I was moderating in Berlin. He liked my brain. I liked his silence. He owed me a favor after I got him out of a career-ending PR mess. This was how he'd repay it, by being the man at my side the day they would all see me for the first time. Because this was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming narrative, rewriting who the family ghost had become. The woman in the shadows had learned to sculpt silence into strength, and she was coming home not to ask for space, but to command it. The venue was exactly as I expected, ornate, rehearsed, and dripping with old money, trying to look effortless. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violins hummed in the distance, but none of it mattered. Not the decor. Not the guests. Not even the floral arch Lyra had once mocked in a bridal magazine, now proudly standing at the center of her curated dream. No, what mattered was the silence that followed when I stepped through the main entrance with Alex at my side. Heads turned. Some squinted unsure. Others gaped. My mother's martini glass tilted slightly as her grip faltered. My father's fake laugh died in his throat. And Lyra, still in her silk robe mid-photo op, froze like a statue carved from shock. She had always been the sun in our family's solar system. I was the moon, silent, steady, forgettable. But tonight, gravity shifted. Nathaniel's face contorted into something between panic and disbelief. He recognized Alex immediately. Of course he did. Everyone in his political circles did. Is that? He muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. This is Alex Knight, my fiancé. The room collectively inhaled. Lyra's stylist dropped a comb. A photographer captured the moment, her reaction, not mine. Fiancé, my mother echoed. Since when? Since Berlin, I said. We met while I was moderating an international panel on digital ethics. I let the words hang there like perfume. Delicate. Potent. Someone asked how I knew the bride. I turned slowly. We share a last name, or did. My father tried to smile, but it came out crooked. Sky, you look different. Success changes posture, I replied. Alex squeezed my hand gently. It was a small act, but enough to say, you're in control now. This wasn't vengeance. This was clarity. I did not want an apology. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to see the woman they had exiled and realize she had returned not as a shadow of her past, but as the storm they never saw coming. She once called me a ghost. Tonight I would haunt her memory in velvet and steel. And the best part, we were just getting started. The moment the officiant cleared his throat to begin, a low murmur rippled through the front row. All eyes had shifted, not to Lyra, glowing in designer lace, nor to Nathaniel, stiff in his tailored tux, but to the woman seated calmly in the fourth pew, wearing midnight blue and silence like armor. Me. Or rather, the version of me they never imagined. The same sky they used to overlook in family photos, cropped out in conversations forgotten during holidays. Except now, my name was murmured like a legend. People leaned in, whispered, wondered. Nathaniel was sweating through his collar, his smile fraying at the edges. Lyra's fingers gripped her bouquet so tightly the stems began to crack. Then it happened. Alex stood. Slowly, confidently, Apologies, he said, his voice smooth as velvet and clear as glass. But before we begin, I believe there's something the bride and groom forgot to mention. Murmurs turned to gasps. Lyra's face drained of color. Nathaniel stumbled forward, trying to regain control. "Sky, please," he began, but I was already standing. "You see," I said, addressing the crowd, "this is not just a reunion. This is a reckoning." Gasps. Cameras clicked. I continued. 3 years ago, these two lied, betrayed, and discarded me. They thought I would disappear quietly. And for a while I did. But silence does not mean surrender. It means strategy. Alex opened a small velvet folder. Inside were signed partnership agreements, board votes, and documents transfers that gave me Sky Ellison controlling interest in Nathaniel's campaign's largest donor firm. Effective as of this morning, Alex announced, Mr. Graves is no longer the majority voice in his own foundation. That voice now belongs to her. A collective inhale swept through the room. Lyra dropped her bouquet. This was not revenge. This was revelation. This was the moment they saw me not as a background character in their story, but as the author of my own. If you've ever been written off, underestimated, or betrayed by those closest to you, tell me in the comments, would you have done the same? Type yes. If you're ready for the next part, because the vows haven't even started, and this story is far from over. The room that once echoed with polished laughter and hollow toasts now pulsed with hushed awe. I had become the gravitational force in a ceremony that was never meant to orbit me. The same guests who barely acknowledged my presence in the past, family, friends, former colleagues, and socialites in Cooter, were now drifting toward me in cautious clusters, drinks in hand, and flattery on their lips. I nodded politely, but my mind remained focused. Lyra stood frozen at the altar. Her bridal glow had curdled into confusion, and then panic. Nathaniel, for all his speeches about transparency and character, was now visibly unraveling, tugging at his tie, as beads of sweat gathered near his temple. His campaign manager quietly slipped out the back. Sky, a voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Mrs. Harrow, Nathaniel's largest benefactor. I had no idea. What you've built, what you've become. Your story, it's remarkable. She looked at me with something dangerously close to admiration. We need more women like you in leadership. Have you ever considered a public role? I smiled, not with pride, but with clarity. The very circles that once dismissed me were now vying to orbit mine. I glanced toward Alex, who gave the slightest nod. His presence beside me, calm, confident, effortlessly poised, was a testament to the woman I had become. He was not a shield or a weapon. He was a mirror to the strength I had rebuilt in silence. Lyra's champagne flute trembled as she tried to salvage her moment. She raised her voice. Let's move on. This is still our wedding. I stepped forward. No, Lyra. This was never a celebration. It was a cover-up. But I won't be your secret anymore. Guests gasped, some already filming. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning disguised in lace and pearls. I turned back to the crowd. Some stories are written in betrayal, others in legacy. Today marks the end of theirs and the beginning of mine. The audience didn't cheer. They listened. And that silence, that reverent stillness, was louder than any applause. Later that evening, I stepped onto the quiet terrace above the ballroom, the city below, sparkling like it had never turned its back on me. Nathaniel and Lyra's wedding had dissolved into awkward whispers and unfinished champagne. I had not ruined their night. They had done that all on their own when they chose betrayal over honesty, spectacle over substance. The irony, they had tried to erase me to protect their image, and yet it was my truth that outshone their illusion. As the breeze lifted the silk hem of my dress, I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who lowered her voice at family dinners, who smiled through slights, who believed love meant being small. That version of Sky had died quietly the day she caught her fiancé and her sister in her own apartment. But something else had been born in the silence: conviction. I did not expose them tonight to humiliate them. I stood tall, because every woman who has ever been underestimated deserves to see what it looks like to rise without permission. I am not here to be polite. I am here to be powerful. From behind me, Alex's voice was soft. You ready? I turned to him, not for validation, but partnership. I nodded. Always. As we walked back inside, I knew one truth would outlive this evening. Silence is not weakness. It is a chrysalis. And when we emerge, we do not ask for space, we take it. If you have ever been dismissed, betrayed, or told to shrink to fit someone else's comfort, this story is for you. Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild from ashes. And do not forget to subscribe, because Sky's story is not over. The next chapter, that is where she rewrites every rule they tried to make her follow.